Hi, I'm Kate Willett, and this is quite literally my masterclass. This course basically walks through all the elements that are necessary for doing a complete safety assessment without the need for information from new animal testing. It builds on decades of experience, 60 some odd authors of these, bringing all this expertise together into this one place where we have packaged it in a very attractive, interactive, sort of fun delivery system that's all free. What we did was we took the risk assessment process and broke it down into modules. This course is designed to help you understand the nature of the information and how to use the information in a risk assessment, specifically for cosmetic products and ingredients, but it also is relevant for any other kind of consumer product. It's designed to provide information that's relevant to mainline toxicologists. So you may be a specialist in vitro methods, but maybe not so familiar with all the in silico methods that are available. In terms of from a regulatory perspective, this is designed to give appreciation for where the information comes from and how it can be used. And also from the business endpoint, it helps you understand how the chemicals are assessed and at what point in the assessment you would get certain kinds of information and apply those to the process. Technology has improved a lot in terms of our ability to culture cells and to query cells, as has our computer science, which allows us to interpret those results. It's that kind of information that can tell you so much more about what a chemical is doing in that cell, exactly what it's doing, what receptors is it binding, what genes is it activating. And then when you look at more complex cell systems, you can ask questions about what the effect of those changes are on cell-cell communication. It's a more predictive, more relevant system for getting the kinds of information that we can use to make better predictions about chemicals, and then also understand how we can design safer chemicals. Animal tests take a long time. They use a lot of animals. They're very labor intensive. And even if you wanted to test all of these chemicals using our current animal-based system, it would take you decades and decades and decades. And then the kind of information that you get out of the animals, you sit around and argue about for sometimes decades and decades and decades.
For one animal test, for one traditional animal test, you usually need a battery of different NAMs to really come to the same safety assessment as you have done before. The animal-free safety assessment collaboration was extremely valuable in order to come forward with masterclasses and with guidance, how to really do these NAM assessments, how to pulling them together. Also depending on what material is going to be assessed, what kind of mode of action it is going to enter in the human body, and then to really come up with the best-in-class, most human-relevant safety assessment.
The thing that's unique to this approach that this course is built around is that the assessments consider exposure up front. It's a human health risk assessment. What you're doing is all the time you're weighing, okay, can I make a decision now or do I need more information? And that way you kind of streamline and make the whole process way more efficient. The whole course is built around the concept of doing that iterative information gathering, assessment, information gathering, assessment. The modules are in order of the risk assessment process. So you start with the problem formulation, that's the first module. Which you set up the parameters of your assessment. So what is it? What are you looking at? What are the biological concerns that you want to know about? As well as, you gather all the information you already have. So what is known about this chemical? What's known about the exposure? And then module 2 is all about how you estimate consumer exposure because it's for cosmetics and cosmetic ingredients. What is the exposure exactly, and what's the variability of that exposure? Like, what's the range? Module 3 talks about some of these predictive models that we use. So it's called predictive chemistry. So you start to get into some computer modeling here. There's 2 modules that talk about how you can use exposure to avoid needing to test anything at all. One is for like regular chemicals, just straight up chemicals, and the other module, it talks about botanicals. And botanicals are interesting because they're usually, they're extracts from plants, and because of that, they're variable, and they're also really complex. Module 5 is how you use non-animal methods to look at the bioactivity of a chemical. The things we call non-animal methods are NAMs, tissue culture models, the organs on a chip, genomics, omics. I don't know if you've ever heard any of those words, but if you look at gene expression patterns or any kind of activity of a cell in a tissue culture dish, that's one of these in vitro methods. And then module 6 is where we talk about what happens to a chemical after it hits your body. Module 7 is where we bring everything together in a risk assessment. So we go all the way back to problem formulation, and we say, okay, here's what we started trying to figure out. Did we actually do that? And what do we have? What have we gathered through all of this investigation that we've done? And how do we put that all together into a final assessment to come up with a risk conclusion? And then module 8, it's a survey basically of the current state of regulations in major parts of the world's economies. So just to give you an idea of sort of what the landscape looks like from a regulatory perspective.
I'm not a toxicologist myself, but even though the AFSA masterclass covers very complex scientific information, it is explained in a very easy to understand manner. So I was able to understand what I was doing and also, responding to the quizzes in the correct way. So if me as a non-toxicologist can take on the course and understand what is explained there, I'm sure that a lot of other non-toxicologist people can do the same. So I really think that in order to become familiar with the topic of animal-free science, even, regulatory people from businesses or also the regulators or policymakers or even university students, if you are planning to take a career in our chemical sector or in the cosmetic sector, it's really important for you to take this course because then you will learn all these concepts that are really important.
I was fascinated with, the universe and my place in it. And so I went from chemistry, which I loved because it's basically math and physics that make tangible here and makes us, so biology. So then I went into biology and I studied different things. I went into doing experiments with zebrafish for drug screening. It was very, very, very interesting looking at the immune system of zebrafish. And we started looking at a bunch of different chemicals and looking at developmental endpoints like liver toxicity, cardiotoxicity, things like that. And we started gathering lots of data and then talking, going around to pharma companies and saying, look, we've got this new model for drug screening. Like, well, why do we need a new model? We already have mice and rats. And it's like, and they're closer to humans than whatever. At least that's people's assumption. And then I started looking at the data. I didn't know what to compare because a zebrafish embryo that's in a solution, it's like a tissue culture. So you don't really know how it's being exposed. You don't really know how much of it's getting into the embryo, and you don't know what the metabolism is because the metabolic capacity of the fish is changing throughout this whole developmental period. I gathered data for mice and rats for dermal exposure, oral exposure, all the data I can find for all the different routes of exposure, including IP, which is just injection. And then I compared them to the zebrafish, and I was not getting very good correlation, not very good. And then I thought, well, maybe I should compare the mouse to the rat. And so I was comparing like to like there, and I was also seeing not a terrific correlation. And I'm thinking, okay, well, we're using rat data in some cases, mice data in some cases to predict humans. And if they're not very good at predicting each other, then how on earth are they predicting humans? And then I kind of went, what? I mean, God, we know so much about biology. Certainly we can do a way better job. Turns out there were people that were working in this area, right? That were developing these methods, had this epiphany already, and were trying to do this. And so I was like, okay, I want to do that. Yeah, now that's what I'm doing. That was a long soliloquy I didn't quite intend to do, but okay.
I am progressing through the AFSA masterclass, and I'm enjoying it in terms of the content, but actually from my background, I find this really useful. So I have a regulatory and a policy and a legal background. So this being a relatively new area that I'm kind of moving into, having been more widely involved in environmental law and technological change, this has been so useful for me to get that context, that background, and a lot of depth and detail as well. The resource is all in one place. There's lots of other webinars out there, but you jump about in terms of topic. This is great. It's a resource that's all in one place. It means that I can dip in and out when I can and when I'm able to. There are resources that I can download as well, and I can keep referring back to it. So I find this really, really useful in terms of my own development to understand kind of when people are talking, I can catch up with what they're talking about. It gives me a really good grounding as well. So I've been really grateful of the resource. There's so many different sciences involved as well. I think it'd be so difficult for someone in my position particularly, who is not an expert in all of these areas, to just kind of keep that in their head. So to have this resource, the fact that it's free as well is, really great. And I know that it's there, and also that it's been developed by a lot of the partners of AFSA. So that gives me confidence as well, so that I know the information that I'm getting is like state of the art, up to date, and I can trust it because it's had that, those partners' eyes on it, developing it together as well. So that's great from my point of view.
This kind of approach brings together people that have usually been siloed in different fields, because in order to take this holistic approach, not only do you have to combine technologies, but you need to think more holistically about the safety assessment, that it requires people from the exposure fields to begin to interact more with the bioassessment fields, and even to start thinking about, okay, human health is one aspect of health. What about environmental health? These are all related to each other. So if this is the first time you've heard about the course and you're wondering whether this is something that you should invest time in, just have a look at the different modules. If you have to perform safety assessment of a chemical, or you have to evaluate a chemical safety assessment, there's something in this course for you. You can learn about all of these exciting new tools. This is the way of the future, and get as much out of it as you would like.